trip of her life.
A young woman vanishing in the streets of Boston. Her body mutilated and part of it never found.
Some articles were taken from the dumpster, and we're just going to hold on to those and let them be looked at by the Boston Police Department.
And 25 years since that grisly discovery, still no leads on who killed the young Swedish nanny or why.
And some leads to some very good information, some takes you in dead ends.
Tonight, a look back at the questions surrounding one of the most disturbing unsolved crimes this city has ever seen.
Who was Karina Holmer? Who would want to hurt her? And what will it take to ever solve this case?
Police are hoping when people see the photograph of Karina Holmes, someone will come forward with information that will help find her killer.
And 25 years later, those questions still remain unanswered. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Jackie Bruno.
And I'm Tim Caputo. Tonight on the 10, we're going to go back to that 1996 murder that rocked both the city of Boston and a close-knit suburb. We should warn you, the details of this crime are graphic, so we want to let you know some of it may be hard to listen to.
Yeah, and with any murder investigation, there's a lot of details that police have to pore over. And in this case, in particular, has a lot of twists and turns.
Tonight, we're laying out the evidence that was collected in this case. Also, the known contacts of the victim at the center of this murder investigation.
And we'll walk you through a web of locations that only add to the mystery, plus the hour-by-hour timeline of the crime itself.
But of course, our story starts with the victim, 20-year-old Karina Holmer, a young woman whose dream of coming to America would turn into anyone's worst nightmare.
And that dream was made possible because of what seemed like a lucky break. In her home country of Sweden, Karina Holmer won the lottery, a small prize off a scratch-off ticket, but it was about $1,500 in American money. And it was the cash she needed to fund her American adventure. So in 1996, she moved to Boston to become a nanny. She was only 20 years old at the time and had only been here for 4 months before she was tragically murdered. Karina's father, Ola Holmer, spoke to NECN just 1 year after that heinous crime.
She was exactly how she looks, that she's pretty on the photo. That's how she was. I mean, you read about those things daily, or, I mean, not exactly this happening, but things like this. You can't imagine how it feels.
In addition to losing his daughter, Karina's father also had to learn about the gruesome details of the crime. It was 25 years ago today, June 23rd, 1996, that this investigation really began, because that's the day the top half of Karina's body was found. Her torso had been stuffed inside a trash bag and left inside this dumpster you see here behind a building in the Back Bay neighborhood. A man in the area found her remains while he was looking for bottles in the dumpster. That's the only physical remains of Karina that have ever been found. Police say the killer strangled her and then used a power saw to cut her body in half. The lower half of her body was never discovered, and detectives didn't find any DNA of any potential killer. To detectives, though, this was a clear murder, but they never determined a motive in this case. Investigators did find one ominous clue from Karina herself, something from a short time before she died that painted a not-so-pleasant picture about her life here. We'll get to that in just a few minutes.
Yes, we certainly will. But before we do that, Tim, we need to look at the location where her remains were found, because how half of her body ended up there still remains a mystery. Now, we told you the dumpster was located behind a building in the Back Bay. More specifically, it was on Boylston Street in the city's Fenway neighborhood. But that's not the neighborhood that she was out in the night that she died. Karina had gone out with friends the night before to Zanzibar, a popular nightclub in downtown Boston, right near the Boston Common. And she was last seen alive around 3:20 a.m. Saturday morning, Tim, by that club.
Yeah, now the distance between where she was last seen alive near that club and where her torso was found is pretty far. It's a 45-minute walk.
But it wasn't downtown Boston or the Fenway neighborhood where the police's investigation really even began. Shortly after her body was discovered, police were brought to South Boston. The family who Karina nannied for also owned this photography studio in a loft on A Street, and that's where Karina would often stay on the weekends. Just days after she was killed, police did search that loft, and then you could see in this video they were seen taking bags of evidence out of that building.
Karina split her time between that Southie loft and the home where she nannied, which belonged to the Rapp family. And they are some of the only known contacts of Karina's. 4 months prior to her death, she began caring for the 2 young children of photographer Frank Rapp and his wife Susan. Now, they lived in Dover. That's a wealthy and quiet community just west of Boston. And the Rapps were questioned in this case, but police never named them as suspects. A neighbor who lived in that same condo complex says she would often see Karina playing with the rap's 2 children.
Very friendly, wave, say hi. And
you found out about this?
It's horrible.
Now, I did reach out to Frank Rapp today. We spoke very briefly on the phone. He didn't want to be interviewed, but he did tell me that he and his family have been through a lot of trauma surrounding this case. He also added he knows it's nothing compared to the trauma the Holmer family has been through, but he had no comment other than about the case or the anniversary of Karina's death.
And a day after Karina's body was discovered, a fire did erupt in a trash bin near the Rapp's Dover condominium. Now, at the time, that, of course, raised suspicions with investigators.
Given the fact that it was very close to the residence in question, there's always a possibility that the crime of arson could be used to cover up evidence of another crime.
Was there any evidence found in the dumpster that was burned out?
Some articles were taken from the dumpster, and we're just going to hold on to those and let them be looked at by the Boston Police Department.
Now, Dover authorities would later say that the fire at the Rapp's condo complex was just a coincidence and not connected to Karina's murder or the Rapp family. So that trash fire in Dover, a dead end. And the items collected at the photography studio in South Boston, they did not provide police with anything solid to go on. So it has now been 25 years, and still investigators are no closer to solving this case.
But there was that one key piece of evidence that still remains a mystery to this day. We mentioned it a little bit earlier. An ominous letter sent by Karina to a friend just weeks before her death. According to the Boston Globe, Karina was looking forward to an early return to her home country of Sweden. Shortly before she was killed, the Globe reports that she had written her friend in Sweden saying, quote, "Something terrible has happened. I cannot tell you right now what it is, but I will tell you when I get home."
Yeah, creepy letter for sure, especially knowing what happened here. And if she was unhappy, though, Karina did not tell her older sister. Just days after the murder, her sister told the Associated Press that Karina had not mentioned anything like this to her.
But she did say that Karina wanted to leave Boston early. In a phone interview on the first anniversary of her daughter's killing, Karina's father told us that he was hoping to bring this case to a close back then.
It doesn't give our daughter back, whether they catch the killer or not. So in that way, it doesn't help us anyway, but of course for humanity, for Boston, it's good if they catch the killer.
That was a year after the crime. It has now been 25 years since this murder happened. And of course, in cases like this, when you have these monumental anniversaries, it really can be pivotal to jogging somebody's memory, or maybe just realizing that they know some information that could be worthwhile to detectives.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Boston police hope will happen here, that someone will remember something of value to this case. When we spoke with Ashley Flowers, the producer and co-host of the wildly successful podcast Crime Junkies, which explores cold-blooded killings all the time, and she actually did a whole episode about this case back in 2018.
And I think that now is the time for people to come forward, and the more people can hear your news segment, our story, there's somebody out there that knows something, and hopefully all these years later, they're not willing to hold on to that secret any longer.
And any information really could be a big break in this case, especially since there could be more details that haven't even been released yet.
Now, here's Kenneth Gray. He's a former FBI special agent and now lecturer at the University of New Haven.
We do not know what the police have at this time. The police routinely do not share all their pieces of evidence that they have. And the reason for that is to be able to use it to divide people who are confessing to a crime that may not have been responsible for it. You hold evidence back. That is, you don't tell what you have until you go to trial.
And you hold it for a quarter century, too. You have to remember, though, also, 25 years ago, investigations looked a lot different back then.
Yeah, they certainly did. Now there are much more advanced ways of extracting DNA, even testing it. And as Kenneth Gray points out, our pool of potential matches has really exploded, especially with the addition of new databases like 23andMe and Ancestry.com.
DNA was actually first used in a criminal case in 1986. This crime happened in 1996, so DNA was relatively new at that time. Additionally, if DNA was collected, the DNA database back in 1996 was very small. The person may not have been in the DNA database at that time. But as time goes on, more people are added to the database.
Of course, if you have any piece of information, no matter how big or small you may think it is, that you think potentially could help in this case, you're being asked to call the Boston Police Department Homicide Unit at the number you see there at the top of your screen. Information can also be left anonymously by calling Crime Stoppers tip line. That number's there as well, 1-800-494-TIPS, rather. Or you could text the word tip to crime or 27463. I can tell you in cases like this, and I know you listen to a lot of podcasts too, it's so surprising how little a new piece of evidence can open the case wide open.
Yeah, and this case is especially strange. The way it was handled with, how she was killed, you got to wonder if that was a first-time killing. It doesn't seem like it. When I listen to my armchair detective bit, it just doesn't seem like that's what you would do if you were a first-time killer. I don't know, so it's very creepy to me.
On the 25th anniversary, police, certainly the homicide unit and Holmer's family, hoping that maybe this will draw up some recollection and some new information for this case. Listen, let's switch gears a little bit now, because that's obviously a heavy topic, but on the other side, weather, as nice as it gets today.
Yeah, really no complaints in that arena. Let's talk to meteorologist Pete Bouchard. Hey, Pete.
Jackie, Tim.